Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. In this episode, I'm going to be talking a little bit about some hidden gems that I've found in Blender and that I've been constantly using for the past couple years. And so I want to share those with you in this episode. Stay tuned. All right, guys. So let's get started with number one. Now, the first one is going to be about how you deal with the UI in Blender. Now, every artist is gonna like their own way of setting up the editors and placing them wherever and however they want to. And so a lot of times you want to start Blender and you want everything ready to go the way you want to. And so what you want to do is you set it up the way you want to, right? So that includes having models inside, cameras, lights, whatever it is that you want to have Blender. Every time you open it up, you're gonna set it up, even the camera angle. And once you have that, you go to File, Default Save Status File, and when you click this, make sure that you click this again, because sometimes people click here and they think they do it and then move the cursor and then it disappears and it doesn't save. And so make sure that you click here and then click here, and then that will save your startup file. And every time you open Blender, that is going to be exactly the way that it opens. Now that's number one. Number two, it has something related to that. And so a lot of times when you work with a team or with other artists, or if you download a file from another artist, you're gonna see that their UI every time you open their file is gonna look different, right? And sometimes you may encounter something like this where you have no idea what's going on, right? And so I know I've seen it, and so a lot of times, it's kind of a hassle to try to figure it out and close things and then setting them up in the way you want to. And so there is a way to bring the file with your current UI. And so when you press Control O for opening, right, you pick the file, and instead of going to open, you're going to go to your settings here and then check off Load UI. And what that does is it's going to open the file exactly with the UI the way you have it set up, pretty much, right? And so that has been extremely useful, especially for working in teams and all that. All right, the third one is going to be about textures. And so a lot of the times you're working on a big scene, and I just have a couple of rocks here. And sometimes you work with high resolution textures. I usually don't work over 4K, but even 4K, which is this right here, you can see that it's pretty detailed, right? It really bugs your viewport when you're browsing around, especially if you have like a big scene. And so one of the things that you can do, if you can go to preferences in here, and you go to viewport, down into textures, and then you limit the size to, I normally do 1K. You can do any of these, but 1K is pretty good for me to see at least the texture in a pretty good resolution. And the reason I do this is, what this does is it's gonna limit the visibility of that texture to a resolution of 1K. And so you can see that it's a little bit low res now, and that's really gonna help a lot with moving with the textures on around the scene. And I usually keep this at 1, like I usually don't have it on 4K, unless it's a very specific moment where I really want to see that texture. But this is a great way to save your performance for your computer while you're working with textures and lighting. Now the other tip here, let's go to another scene. We can do it on this one. It's going to be, and this is a pretty common one, but I still love it, is the quick favorites menu. If you press Q, you're gonna see that you're gonna get a quick favorites menu. If you're not using it, you may see this blanked. There will be nothing here. And what this does is you can add to this menu things that you are currently constantly using in your pipeline. And so a lot of the times, you have to go into a menu and then find the thing or look for it and all that. And so that sometimes takes a lot of time, especially when you're doing it constantly, throughout the whole day. And so, for example, if I know that I use lock camera to view, right? Because I use it a lot, I can right click on it, add to quick favorites, right? And so now if I press Q, you're going to see that I have it here on my menu, right? And if I don't want it anymore, I can right click, remove from quick favorites. And so as you can see, I have a lot of stuff here. Some of my favorite things to have here is preferences, import and export OBJs here. Check out the wireframe if I want to. I have the overlays turned off right now. Face orientation, right? So I can see the normals, and all this stuff is stuff that I really use a lot. And so I keep them here. Now, the great thing about quick favorites is that it changes with depending on the mode that you're in, right? So right now we're in object mode. And so I have these options here. But if I go into edit mode and I press Q, now I have options that are only available when I am in edit mode. And so these are things that I currently use a lot while I'm in edit mode. And so that way it doesn't really become a big mess, your menu, with the things that you're gonna add in there. And again, you can add things, pretty much anything you can add by right clicking on it. So you can go to the thing that you want to put in, right click, add to quick favorites, or remove from quick favorites. Now, last one is going to be rendering. And so let's go to this one here. One thing that I've been using a lot, especially for concepting and props and all that, is the freestyle rendering. And what this does, you can find this on your render settings here. If you go down, it doesn't matter if you use Cycles or Eevee, you can have it available on both. You go down to freestyle, you turn that on. I keep this in absolute, and normally this is on 1 by default, but usually I start with 0.5. Usually 1 is usually pretty thick. And what this does is it's gonna add a outline and line to the geometry. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like. So this is an example of this, right? And you can see that I have it on a separate layer now, right? And what this, this gives it like a nice look. And if you want to go for this sort of look, I use this for a lot of animation projects, for layouts and stuff like that. It's really easy to at least have a base of lines started in your renders. But the cool thing about this is that two things. One, you have to be careful when you turn it on and you render it. Usually you will see the render, and then it's gonna take a little while to compute the line work on the model. So when you see the rendering, if you don't see the lines, make sure that you give it some time, because you should see a progress line on top of the render that is calculating the lines. And so a lot of the times I get impatient and then I stop the rendering because I think it's wrong or something, and it's actually just calculating the lines, and I just need to wait a little bit longer. So make sure that you do that. The other thing is that you can actually have the lines as a render pass. So you can see here that I have it on a separate layer, right? And the way to get that is if you go to your render passes here, you scroll down under freestyle, you turn that on. I think it's going to be on if you turn it on the render settings, but you have to click here as render pass. And whenever you render it as an EXR, then you will get your, you get your layers for your render passes, but you will also get a freestyle render pass with the lines. Now, if you do that, keep in mind that if you do this as render pass, you will not see it on the render. So once the render is done, do not wait for the lines, because since you have it, I don't know why they do it this way, but since you have it checked in here, you're gonna get that whenever you open the EXR render. And so that way it's just a little bit easier to control. I sometimes put a mask on this and then I erase the parts that I don't want. So there's a lot of so depending on your model, right, it's gonna be some noises that don't really make sense to have, and this background stuff and all that. And so you can easily get rid of it with a mask or something like that. And so this is a great tool that I've been using quite a lot lately. All right, guys. So that's it for today's episode. I really hope that at least one of those you didn't know, hopefully. Let me know in the comment section below if you know one of them, one of those hidden gems that you can find in Blender that maybe nobody knows about, that is pretty useful. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.